Donald Trump lies all the time.
I mean, it's not a secret that he was a friend for quite a number of years of Jeffrey Epstein.
She read the files and realized Donald Trump is all over the Epstein files. And she was doing this to protect Donald Trump.
Implicate in what? That the president of the United States engaged in unlawful sex with minors? Is that what you think this is hiding? Do you consider Trump a corrupt president?
1000%. He is absolutely corrupt.
Welcome to another edition of SOS America. I'm Charles Feldman. As always, I thank you very much for watching, or if you happen to be listening, for listening. This is the podcast that does try to answer the question, what the hell is happening in America right now? We originally thought of this many episodes ago, many months ago, as something that would be of interest primarily to people outside the U.S. trying to figure us out. But it turns out that there are more than enough Americans trying to figure us out. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our very special guest for this episode. He is Congressman Ted Lieu. He is a representative of the 36th Congressional District here in the state of California, where I am. He is a Democrat. He is in his 6th term in the United States House of Representatives. And he sits on two very powerful committees, the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He is also the vice chair, I believe that that's correct, right, of the Democratic Caucus. So, Congressman Lieu, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Charles. It's good to be with you again.
Let me start off by asking a question that whenever I have asked it of other guests, I kind of think to myself, maybe this is a bit of hyperbole, the question. And then I'm surprised the answers I get indicate that perhaps it's not, sadly, hyperbole. And the question is, has the United States now entered a period of authoritarian rule? And again, even as I say it now, I think, well, that just doesn't sound possible, but you would be surprised, maybe not, by how many very distinguished guests on this program have answered in the affirmative. What do you think?
Donald Trump is certainly going down an authoritarian road. What my observation is, it's that the tide has turned and the American people have turned against him. So if you saw what happened earlier last year, is Trump and J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, and Kristi Noem basically came out with a plan of sending masked federal agents across America to terrorize communities. And they thought that the American people would embrace that. In fact, the American people have emphatically rejected it. And then you see, for example, Minnesota, you see Americans risking their lives and their freedom to defend people they don't even know. It was amazingly inspiring to see the Americans come out across our country in protests to film and document ICE operations, to warn people about ICE operations. And what that shows me is America is not going to go down this dark path. We have rejected Donald Trump's vision. He has already lost. His vision is not being embraced by Americans. And now through various special elections, you just see his losses being actualized.
When you say he has lost the backing of the American public, are you including in that, Congressman, the folks who are part of his MAGA, Make America Great movement? Because I haven't seen any polling that would indicate that to any great extent those people have lost confidence in Donald Trump, despite the fact that he has not improved the economy, which is one of the reasons they voted for him in the first place.
Most recent Associated Press poll had Donald Trump at 62% disapproval. And because of how badly the economy is doing, you're having a lot of independents turn on Donald Trump, as well as moderate Republicans. And then because of the Epstein files cover-up, you're now actually seeing parts of his base turn against him. And you saw a number of MAGA influencers call for Pam Bondi's resignation. You see a number of MAGA influencers saying they can no longer support Donald Trump. And so we'll see how far his base erodes, but you're seeing at least some erosion.
All right, some, but since you mentioned polling, there's an AP poll out that I just looked at that says that basically Americans are disenchanted with both parties. They're not that thrilled with the Republican Party, which is the party of the president, but they're not that thrilled in growing numbers with the Democratic Party, your party.
So when you look at the crosstabs, what you're going to see is you're going to see a bunch of Democrats not happy with the Democratic Party because they think we should be far more aggressive in taking on Donald Trump. I happen to agree with that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to election time, all these Democrats vote Democratic. And that's what you actually see in all these special elections, where Democrats have outperformed by margins far greater than 2017 when we flipped the House in 2018.
You mentioned independence, right? So is it your notion that for Democrats to succeed now long term, forgetting about the midterms, we'll get into that in a few minutes, but forgetting the midterm elections in November, in the long term, does your party need to really capture the majority of independent voters, since most voters, I believe, are now considering themselves to be independent?
Yes. So the answer is yes. The party that wins independence is basically going to win most elections. Now, there is a uh, race that is very instructive. It was a Texas State Senate district that Democrats flipped earlier this year. It was a district Donald Trump won by 17 points. Democratic candidate wins by 14 for a 31-point differential over performance. And when you look at the turnout numbers, it wasn't that there was a surge in Democratic turnout. The preliminary numbers show that of the people who voted, 51% were Republican, 35% were Democrat. That means you had Republicans voting for the Democratic candidate. And that is a very dangerous situation for the Republican Party when you have their own voters now voting for the Democratic candidates.
So if you were Donald Trump now, and I don't want to, give you that curse, but if you were Donald Trump now, would you be worried? Because he certainly doesn't come across as a man who's worried.
Well, he's absolutely panicked. You look at his social media posts.
Oh, I mean, if you're talking about the way
Right about?
you're talking about the way he writes, yes, but well,
But he's panicked about the midterms. That's why the administration did this weird thing of seizing ballots from, Georgia for elections
Right.
happened in 2020. You see him uh, telling people to do all sorts of voter suppression. You saw him try to, gerrymander a mid-decade by telling Texas to get him 5 seats, and then Democrats fought back. And I think at the end of this, with all the states, Democrats are probably going to do better in terms of how we did. But Donald Trump is very panicked, and he shows it both through his words and his actions about the midterms.
But when you talk about the confiscation of those ballots in the state of Georgia, the Atlanta area, really, is that, in your view, the foundation that the White House is laying, along with sending ICE agents and other federal personnel to various Democratic-led cities? Is he laying the foundation to try to thwart the elections in November? And could he succeed at that? In which case, well, he might be panicked to some degree. In the end, could he not win?
I think it'd be very hard for him to succeed because the states in which were targeting House seats, the overwhelming majority are states where there's a Democratic governor, Democratic Secretary of State, Democratic Attorney General. There is already existing federal law that prevents federal agents from showing up near a polling location within a certain distance. And then you see what happened with this administration is when they get punched, they back down. And so they pull out of Minnesota with their tails between their legs because they got punched. And the American people stood up and said, "We are not accepting what you're trying to do." And so this administration is going to push until they're punched. And we're definitely going to punch back about any attempt to rig the elections or steal the elections.
Well, let me push back a little bit on that, Congressman. I mean, they haven't totally withdrawn from the state of Minnesota. They've withdrawn a sizable number. You're absolutely right about that. But they have made it a point of saying that their immigration, immigration enforcement is still going to go on, not only in Minnesota, but in other Democratic-led states. So while there's a bit of, maybe even a substantial amount of retrenchment, they haven't totally waved the white flag.
Well, no, because they're going to actually do what every other administration has done, and they're going to have ICE deport people who have removal orders or have other issues. The difference, though, is the administration was making a big showing of how they would go after these undocumented immigrants. And they thought that American people would embrace that. And the American people said, no, we don't want to see mass deportations. We don't want you to deport people who haven't committed any crimes and are living their life and helping their communities and so on. And they don't want to see folks like 5-year-old Liam Ramos being arrested by ICE. And so it's not just that they've completely stopped Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis-St. Paul. They also ordered that all their agents had to wear body cameras in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. That's a reversal. We think all the agents should wear body cameras across the United States, but certainly they reverse on that. They kicked Greg Bovino, the commander at large of Border Patrol, out of Minnesota. And so you do see them no longer doubling down and, in fact, retrenching.
But they're still wearing masks.
Oh, well, they're absolutely wearing masks because they're not real police officers. If they're real police officers, they would wear body cameras and not masks. And that's one reason the Department of Homeland Security is shut down right now, because Democrats have a series of reasonable demands that tell ICE and Border Patrol agents to simply comply with what real police officers comply with.
Although the immigration enforcement goes on, because don't they have enough money still from the bill that the president had passed by Congress not that long ago? So there's still funding.
Yes. So this was the reconciliation bill. We call it the big ugly law that passed last year, where every Democrat voted against it and every Republican voted for it. And so, yes, the Republicans own this. They own the cruelty of ICE. They own the reckless behavior and abusive behavior of ICE and Border Patrol. And they see shockingly low poll numbers now, not just for the president, but also for the generic congressional ballot, which asks the question of, do you want a Republican or Democratic Congress? And specifically on the issue of immigration. It was one of Donald Trump's strongest issues. Now he is underwater on immigration.
Do you consider Trump a corrupt president?
1,000%. He is absolutely corrupt. First of all, which president goes around asking for, a 747 jet, right? So he did that, and now he's going to get a 747 jet from Qatar. He also has all of these dealings with different businesses, and an article came out today showing that he and his family have made over $4 billion since he started on January 20th of last year. It is corruption. It is upfront, and it's in our faces.
So what happens with that? Certainly he is not going to be investigated by his Department of Justice. And because of the Supreme Court's ruling not that long ago, he's, I'm sure, going to say that everything he is doing is within the purview of being president of the United States, and therefore he's shielded from prosecution. So what happens to all this transparent alleged corruption?
But there's electoral consequences. You have people who do in surveys say they're not supporting Trump or Republicans because of the corruption. In terms of consequences personal to Trump, a future administration could prosecute him. He would raise the issue of immunity. But our reading of the law is immunity doesn't apply to crimes. And so immunity doesn't say the president can actually commit crimes. And so they'll be litigated if a future administration chooses to prosecute Trump, and then we'll see what happens.
So let's go down the road to November, the midterm elections, and uh, if independents are actually being persuaded to vote for Democrats in larger numbers rather than Republicans, and the Democrats take over the House of Representatives. I mean, I don't think you would think they would take over the Senate, the Democrats, do you?
There now is a path in a way there wasn't a path last year. And so
What's the path?
flipping the Senate as well.
No, but what's the path for the Senate?
Oh, sure. So I think we'll flip North Carolina. I think we have a reasonable shot of flipping Alaska. We have a great candidate there. They're Mary Peltola. I think we have a reasonable shot of flipping Ohio. There is now a shot at flipping Iowa. And then there's a shot at flipping Texas.
Well, then let's take the sort of macro example here. Let's say the Democrats end up controlling both chambers of Congress, the House and the Senate.
Right.
Does Donald Trump get impeached and this time convicted?
I think Democrats are refocused on number one issue facing Americans, which is the economy. And so we will first of all try to reverse all of Donald Trump's tariffs, which have jacked up prices and increasing inflation. If you look at core CPI, the core consumer price index, it actually accelerated from last month to this month. And so, or December to January. So you see the continuing effects of these tariffs. So we also focus on healthcare. We would try to reverse the cuts to Medicaid, to Medicare, as well as the Affordable Care Act. So I think those are some of the issues we work on will be the kitchen table issues.
But you're avoiding the issue of potential impeachment and conviction if the Democrats control both houses of Congress. Is that because do you feel that there's no appetite among either the American population or among members of Congress to go down that road again with Donald Trump?
Well, you would need 2/3 of the Senate to convict. So I was a former impeachment manager for Donald Trump's second impeachment. And the reason I just say second impeachment is because he was just that bad that he was impeached twice. But the second impeachment had bipartisan vote out of the House of Representatives. It was a bipartisan vote for conviction, 57 U.S. senators, including a number of Republicans. It was the highest conviction vote in history. Couldn't get to 2/3 because that's a really high standard. So there's the political reality of could you get a 2/3 vote in the U.S. Senate? Maybe you could. I think it would depend on what crime or crimes Donald Trump committed.
Well, let's pull back a bit and presume, for the sake of this discussion, that the Democrats, because I think the polling is firmer on this than on the Democrats taking control of the Senate. Let's say the Democrats do take control of the House. Are we going to see, forget about impeachment and all that, are we going to see endless investigations being launched aimed at this particular administration?
So when you flip the House, every committee becomes chaired by a Democrat.
Yeah.
And if there's fraud, waste, abuse, or crimes being committed, we're absolutely going to investigate. We get subpoena power, and we will be issuing subpoenas to people who have hurt the American people, have defrauded the American people, people who are corrupt, people who are covering up crimes. So we would investigate issues that are harming the American people.
And that, I would presume, is why you think Donald Trump is scared about the Democrats, at least vis-a-vis the House, taking control, right? That I guess it's your feeling that he would be concerned about being embroiled in one investigation after another, right?
It could be one of his concerns. There's a real easy way to not have it happen, which is stop doing corrupt criminal stuff.
Well, there's all the past stuff which you can't ignore, can you?
You're absolutely correct. So the Epstein files cannot be ignored. And just a simple fact, the Department of Justice has confirmed there were over 1,000 victims of Epstein's global pedophilia sex trafficking operation. To date, Attorney General Pam Bondi has held exactly 0 men accountable. That's just a ludicrous number. And you have countries like France who are arresting people, who are opening up criminal investigations. And Pam Bondi literally tried to shut down the investigation last July. Her Department of Justice issued a memo saying they've uncovered no evidence to charge anyone else, basically. And it was only public pressure that made them release these Epstein files. And so we'll see what happens. But this issue's not going to go away.
We should point out, for those who may not be familiar, Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of the United States right now, a Trump appointee, which is how Attorney Generals usually get to where they are. They're appointed by the president in power. What do you think, Congressman, the cover-up, the Epstein thing? I was going to get to Epstein a little bit later, but since you brought him up, what do you think it's fundamentally about? Is the cover-up because there are so many people that were actually involved in a pedophile ring, or is the cover-up that there would be so many people embarrassed because they just had poor judgment in befriending somebody who turned out to be a real evil guy?
I'm going to give you my view of this. Last year, Attorney General Pam Bondi went on national TV and said that the Epstein files were on her desk. Epstein's client list. Epstein's client list was on her desk. Then a few months later, she shuts down the investigation. And I suspect she read the files and realized Donald Trump is all over the Epstein files. And she was doing this to protect Donald Trump. That is my read of it, because you can't explain why she would shut down this Epstein files investigation.
But
Why would she? Why would she? Right? Why would she do that? Other than when she read this stuff on the desk, she's like, "Whoa, I can't go forward with this because it's going to implicate Donald Trump."
But implicate Trump in what? I mean, it's not a secret that he was a friend for quite a number of years of Jeffrey Epstein. There are innumerable photos of the two of them together in years gone by. So implicate in what? In criminal activity, and in what? That the president of the United States engaged in unlawful sex with minors? Is that what you think this is hiding, this conspiracy?
That's what the FBI's own internal slideshow said. One of the documents released in Epstein files was a 21-slide presentation by the FBI, contains 2 credible allegations of crimes committed by Trump, including one of sex with a minor. You have a separate document, which was a witness calling into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center. He reported 2 things. One, that he drove Donald Trump around in a limo, and he overheard Trump talking on his cell phone to Jeffrey and talking about abusing a girl, and that what Trump said was so disturbing that the limo driver wanted to stop the limo and hurt Trump. That's how aggravated he was. And this driver also said he met a girl who directly told him that Trump raped her, as well as Epstein raped her. The Department of Justice never interviews this witness. There's a second document I reviewed that basically says that. It basically says they left a voicemail for this witness. There's no response, and then that was it. There was no follow-up. And these,
by the way, let me just yeah, both just very quickly, to because I do have to point out that Donald Trump has repeatedly denied doing anything that would be considered illegal vis-a-vis Jeffrey Epstein. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Donald Trump lies all the time, right? In a civil lawsuit a few years ago, he said he never committed sexual assault, and a civil jury found that, in fact, he did, right? So Donald Trump just lies all the time. So I just named you a couple documents. There's other documents that have allegations and evidence that Donald Trump committed crimes, and there's really no evidence that the Department of Justice investigated these cases, and it's just highly troubling.
So if the Democrats win the House, do you think that the things that you've just alluded to would be the topics of investigations by the House?
Well, it depends on what the Department of Justice does with the Epstein files. They've only, I mean, there's another 3 million files they haven't released, and um, the ones that they have released, they have these random redactions, which we can't tell why they're redacting these names, and so there's still a lot that has to be done. And if the Department of Justice comes clean, is transparent, then you wouldn't need an investigation. But if the Department of Justice continues to engage in what looks like a cover up, then yes, the Judiciary Committee, which I said, this would be one of the issues that we investigate.
So would Congress be able then to actually, you mentioned before, all the issues that are really important to Americans, the cost of living, God, you can go on and on and on what Americans are really upset and concerned, rightly so, I think, about. But do you run the risk, when I say you, I mean Congress, of getting so bogged down in a myriad of investigations for all the things involving Donald Trump and his administration, that when is Congress going to get around to doing all that other stuff?
So certainly there is that risk. I do think the Epstein situation is different because we are talking about girls being raped, and I think the overall majority of the American public understand that that's a serious issue. And regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you understand what Jeffrey Epstein and his perpetrators did was horrific. And so far, there appears to be very, very little accountability, and the American public can't understand that.
The Democrats themselves are not very unified in many ways, are they? I mean, there's a real battle going on. You're smiling. Well, actually, why are you smiling at that? Because
Um, no, just sort of reminds me of all sort of political parties. It's every year you can sort of you can say the same thing. It'll be true whether it was now, whether it was 50 years ago.
yeah, you're probably right about that. But now you have this real battle waging between the very left wing of your party and more of the center. I don't want to say the right wing of the Democratic Party. I don't think that exists, but the center of the Democratic Party and the more extreme left wing. And I cite as an example, look at the state of California, the very state that you represent one of the districts of, right? Where in California there's a move to tax a tax on very, very wealthy people. And there isn't a unified position of the Democratic Party. You have people like the senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, who is supportive of the tax on wealthy individuals. But then you have the governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom, who appears to be, even though he denies it, appears to be running for president, who is opposed to that. So it does sound like there's a major fault line that's dividing your party. And how do you put that all together? How do you reconcile those differences?
So I think the actual difference in the Democratic Party are actually less than the Republican Party. So I'll stick with your example. Um, Democrats pretty much uniformly agree that the wealthy should pay their fair share. Now, there are degrees of difference there. So Biden, for example, when he was president, did talk about increasing taxes on people who made over $400,000. Um, California is a specific proposal. There's other proposals. And so there'll be degrees of difference where some Democrats believe in certain amounts and others agree there should be lesser amounts. But people generally do agree that wealthy corporations and wealthy people don't pay their fair share. Republicans, for example, let's talk about education. Some of them, think we should, educate kids, and some of them want to eliminate the Department of Education, right? They have a much bigger sort of gulf, just sort of on certain issues. So I think for Democrats, a lot of it's a matter of degree, but the goal is generally the same. With the Republican Party, you just have people who are fundamentally at odds with even the goal.
Well, let me stick. Okay, but fair point, but let me stick to your party. So where do you stand on that? Are you in the Bernie Sanders wing when it comes to here in the state of California, anyway, imposing a tax on very wealthy people, or are you more in the Governor Gavin Newsom wing, who thinks that that would be counterproductive and drive people, the very people that California needs for a tax base, drive them out of the state?
So I'm at the federal level, and so at the federal level, I support what Joe Biden supported, which was increasing tax revenue on people who made over $400,000. Honestly, I haven't really followed California issues that much. I have not read the proposed ballot measure, so I'd like to just read it before I make determination. But again, it's a matter of degree, right? It's sort of, how do you hold people?
Well, it's a big degree. I mean, enough that, like, as I said, I mean, you've got Bernie Sanders campaigning in California for something, while Gavin Newsom, the governor, is out of the state saying, nope, it's a bad idea. That sounds like a little bit more than just a minor dispute, no?
But again, it's right. It's over a degree of how do you want to hold wealthy people accountable, right? So a $400,000 federal increase on taxes, a federal increase in taxes for people who make over $400,000, that actually is going to affect a lot more people, right? Than one state doing something for billionaires who happen to reside in that state. So again, to me, it's a matter of degree. Do you want to hold a lot more or have a lot more rich people who may not be billionaires sort of pay somewhat more? Do you want to have a handful of billionaires pay more? Or maybe you want both? I have to read the California proposition first before I can make a educated sort of decision on it.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk, because you're in the Foreign Affairs Committee as well. So let's talk about foreign affairs for a minute or two here. President Trump has said that he recently spoke with the president of China about arms shipments to Taiwan, which my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, I don't think that the U.S. is allowed by its own laws, or at least by rules that were set many decades ago. I don't think we are allowed to discuss with China weapons to Taiwan. If I'm correct about that, what do you make of President Trump saying he's done exactly that?
That's clear. Yes, it does violate the 6 assurances to Taiwan that every U.S. president has followed until Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump brings all sorts of rules and laws and principles and norms, and I oppose him doing that. But that's what he's doing, and until we sort of flip the House and flip the Senate, there's not that much a minority party can do. But you're absolutely right. This is not something that our former presidents have done.
In terms of Russia and Ukraine, the latest I've seen, and this is going to post in a week or so, so things may change. But as of the date that we are talking, there really doesn't seem to be any real significant progress in ending that war between Russia and Ukraine, at least on terms that would be satisfactory to both Russia and Ukraine. And the president of the United States consistently is egging Ukraine on to get to the table, to come to some kind of conclusion. He doesn't really do the same with Vladimir Putin. Do you think that this war in Europe is going to soon come to an end? And do you think it's going to come to an end in such a way that not only will Ukraine feel secure, but the rest of Western Europe will?
That's a great question. I believe the only way Putin goes to the negotiation table, it is that if his troops are defeated on the battlefield in Ukraine. Because if they're not, he's going to keep on going. I believe that he believes what he says, which is that Ukraine is part of Russia. I believe he wants to take over Ukraine, and he believes that Ukraine is rightfully within the country of Russia. And so he's not going to stop until that happens. And so if you don't stop him, then he's not going to negotiate a peace, because his goal is to have all of Ukraine. And that's why I've urged uh, the Biden administration and now the Trump administration to give Ukraine everything they need to defend themselves. And to me, the best way to get Putin to the negotiating table is for Ukraine to defeat Russia on a battlefield in Ukraine.
But is that really going to happen? I mean, this is now in its fourth year, this particular war, and both sides are kind of bogged down. Russia isn't really making any significant progress, which is why I think it wants to get the entire eastern portion of Ukraine under its wing, even parts that it hasn't on the battlefield succeeded in capturing. But the Ukrainians aren't exactly rolling over the Russians, and the Russians at this point, while they continue to bombard Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine, are not making as much military progress as one would have expected them to have made years ago, before it became apparent that the Russians perhaps aren't as powerful as they would like the world to think. So, where do you see the realistic road to a peace that would do the things we just talked about, that would be satisfactory to Ukraine, that would be protective of the interests of Western Europe, and also would keep Vladimir Putin happy enough that he doesn't try to invade other countries? Where's that road?
I served active duty in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years, and then I served additional 21 years in the reserves. Had a chance to study a lot of military history, and my view is that in any conflict, the side that makes the decision to win generally wins. So the Biden administration failed to make the decision to win. The Trump administration is failing to make the decision to win, and so that's why you have this stalemate happening there. If the United States made the decision to win and gave Ukraine what they needed to win, I guarantee you, Ukraine would win. It may not take, it might take a while, but Ukraine will win. And so that has been my belief ever since Ukraine stopped Russia's initial invasion. Congressman Chrissy Houlihan and I, less than a month after that invasion, sent a letter to the Biden administration saying you got to give more air power to Ukraine. No modern military would ever fight a war without adequate air power. And it was insane that the Biden administration never really did that. It's sort of insane that it wasn't until recently that Ukraine started getting F-16s. But Ukraine is now, in fact, getting some better weapons. Took way too long for that to happen. But if we do give Ukraine what it needs, I do believe Ukraine can stop Putin on the battlefield. And then that's when Putin will come to the negotiating table.
Do you see Greenland and Canada becoming the 51st and 52nd states of the U.S. anytime in the near future?
Under a constitution, only Congress can declare war. And the one thing that everyone has to do before they become a member of the U.S. military is they take an oath to the Constitution. And a presidential order to attack Greenland, one of our allies, or attack Canada, one of our allies, that would be an illegal order. And I would expect that our military generals would know better and would not execute that order.
Now, as you know, since you went there, some of your fellow Congresspeople have gotten into some hot water with the Trump administration for telling the military that it is under no obligation to follow illegal orders. Are you worried about running afoul of the administration on that one?
I am not, because I still do believe in our jury system, and you saw it happen when the administration went completely fascist and tried to indict these six Democratic lawmakers who also were veterans themselves. A grand jury said no, and I'm a former prosecutor, and I completely agree with the saying that you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, because the grand jury only hears the evidence that the prosecutor presents. They don't get any evidence from the defense. And that's why grand juries indict virtually all the time, except under the Trump administration, where they have lost a number of cases at the grand jury level, where the grand jurors simply said, this case is bullshit. We're just not going to vote for it.
Since you use the word fascist, is the president a fascist in your view?
1,000%. He's fascist.
Why?
Because of the actions he has taken and tries to take. Just, in his first term, right? I mean, like, he literally incited an insurrection because he lost, right? He's a sore loser. And he basically told people to stop the electoral college certification because he can't handle losing. And then he does all these actions now to try to steal and rig the midterms. His administration has defied a number of lower court orders. He himself believes that executive orders are law. They are not. Executive orders are simply instructions of federal agencies, but he thinks that somehow he can say something in an executive order and therefore everyone has to follow it. They do not, because they're not law. But he acts like a fascist.
And yet, a fair number of the people who voted for him, I suspect, 77 million, while he may have lost a number of them as the years have gone by, I'm guessing that, a fair number of those, so probably in the tens of millions, would still vote for Donald Trump if he were allowed to run again. I know he thinks that perhaps he can, but he can't, as you know. But let's say he was able to. I think a fair number would still vote for him. So, what do you do, and what do you tell all of those people when the day comes when Donald Trump is no longer in the White House? What do you tell them, the people who think that he is God's gift to them?
That's a great point you make. So I do want to point you and the listeners to research that has been done. This is well before even Trump ran, and they studied different countries and they studied authoritarianism. And it turns out that about a third of the population simply like authoritarian candidates. They just tend to vote for candidates who are authoritarian. Now, the reason you don't have a lot more authoritarian leaders is because a third is not a majority, right?
Mhm.
Now, in the United States, every now and then you take that third and then you add people to it who maybe aren't paying that much attention or really upset at what Biden did with, the economy or so on. And then you're going to get to a majority. Uh, but it does show that, yes, you're going to have people that are just going to support Trump precisely because he's authoritarian. That's just something that I don't know, for some folks in human nature, that's what they like. And it's also true that Trump will be gone at the end of his term, because one of the best things that the American people did is they put in term limits for the U.S. president.
I think that even Mr. Trump's fiercest critics would concede that at many levels he's a very gifted politician. I think anyone who can get elected president not once but twice is by definition a gifted politician. Um, who in your party, who in the Democratic Party, has that kind of charisma, that kind of that ability to sort of, kind of capture at least a large segment of the population's pulse on where they stand, on what they are upset about, what they are angry about, which are some of the root reasons why people voted for Donald Trump to begin with. They felt, I think, that he was a loudspeaker for what they were feeling. Who in your party can do that?
And so Trump is amazing at branding. He is very
Yeah.
good at that. He also had uh, incredible name ID because of The Apprentice, and even before that, the things he would do in terms of his hotels, casinos, in a way that very few other politicians ever have had. So part of it could be not so much because he's a gifted politician, but he was really gifted at branding and
Okay.
um, being a celebrity, right? So it's one reason that um, California elected Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Mhm.
Jesse Ventura got elected. There's something about just something pure name ID uh, that people vote for, because again, many people lead busy lives. They don't pay attention to politics, and when they go to voting booth, they're going to see a bunch of names. And studies just show they just often just vote for a name that they have heard of. Um, so on the Democratic side, the good thing about having a primary, which we didn't have this past election, is that the American people will actually see a bunch of these Democratic candidates talk about their vision for America and see how they come across in terms of being a leader, and whether they will be comfortable with them as president of the United States. So I think it's too early to tell, but I think we have a lot of great Democratic candidates, and people will see that through the primary system.
But because of social media, which plays perhaps now the most important role, more than broadcast television, certainly more, I think, than newspapers in getting politicians elected or not elected, as the case may be. Who do you see in the Democratic Party who has, again, that charisma to cut and that ability to brand? Because you're, I think, are absolutely right about Donald Trump. He's brilliant at branding. Who do you see, if anyone, who has that same innate sense of how to get attention on social media platforms, which might be the formula to victory?
I think I'm being purely objective here. Gavin Newsom's social media account is the best of uh, any politician I've seen. It is
Hot gutter of California.
on
Yeah.
point. Correct. It's funny. It's on point. It's very, very good. And so, not everyone, does that. But if you're talking about social media, his account is extraordinary.
Congressman Ted Lieu, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us on this episode of SOS America. I enjoyed the conversation. And for those of you watching and listening, as always, we welcome your comments. If you'd like to subscribe, it is free, as it always is. Until the next episode of SOS America, I'm Charles Feldman. Thank you.